You're listening to Synergy to Synastry, the podcast where two corporate girlies called to follow their intuition take you on a journey of self-exploration through metaphysical modalities.
I'm Christine, intuitive coach and clairvoyant.
And I'm Renee, psychic intuitive and astrologer.
We're excited that you're here and honored to be your spiritual guides. If you enjoy this podcast, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen. It helps listeners find our show, plus it automatically enters you into our raffles to win a free psychic reading.
Now, let's get into the episode. Hello and welcome to part 3 of our Greek lore mini-series. The focus of today's episode is Greek lore in practice. Make sure to listen to parts 1 and 2 first because I will be referencing the previous episodes in this mini-series, so you can pause now if you haven't, head back in the feed and check those out. And to start us off, I just wanted to share a little bit of a reflection here. I did speak in the modernity episode about the Olympics. I was recording that episode the opening night of the Olympics. And today I am recording the day before the closing ceremony. In a lot of ways, there's some symbolism here because I'm closing the chapter on Greek lore just as this ancient Greek tradition is going to be wrapping up as well. So what we're going to be talking about today is first a little educational piece. I did some research to build on that storyline that we've had throughout this mini-series on the specific methods of divination that the ancient Greeks were known to participate in. So that's what we'll start with. And then I will share some of my experimentations. I plucked out some ideas for modern practices, tested those out, took a bunch of notes. I'm going to go through what those experiences were like. When I was researching ancient Greek divination, something that I noticed, so kind of shot me off on a little side tangent of research here, I kept seeing the term oracle and seer. So an oracle, not like oracle cards, but an oracle as in a person as an oracle and a seer as a person. So I wanted to define those terms first. In ancient Greece, an oracle was somebody who was considered to have a divine connection. These individuals were sought out for insights and to support their decision-making. Often, the messages from oracles in these stories are very vague or very open to interpretation. A very famous oracle is the Oracle Delphi. She is often elevated in history to the status of a priestess. Just to bring back to divination tools, you can compare it to tarot. We have the High Priestess card. That's really the energy of someone that is an oracle. And in contrast, when we're talking about a seer, these types of people can live a little bit more under the radar. They don't have the same status marker as an oracle does. In ancient Greece, they were defined as being people who interpreted natural phenomena, so more connected to nature and the use of divination tools, versus the oracle was framed more as someone who's just psychic, receives maybe clairvoyant or claircognizant messages. Whereas the seer, even though you might think seer and go, well, shouldn't a seer be seeing things that's clairvoyance? It really wasn't framed that way. It doesn't mean that those individuals didn't leverage the psychic clairs that we've talked about many times in this podcast, but they were mostly discussed as leveraging the divination tools. So when we're talking about natural phenomena, I will give some examples of what that looked like specifically in ancient Greece, but we have mentioned some of them before in this podcast, such as hydromancy, which is one that the Greeks also participated in as well, looking to perceive images off of the reflection. So that would be engaging with nature to see, to divine the wisdom from what was around them, versus the oracle is more just a general recipient. I would kind of equate in some ways a seer being very similar to what like a modern day psychic reader does. And what we've been talking about a lot is, well, what am I doing when I'm giving a reading? I am translating. And this is where we have a bit of the splintering, because it doesn't mean that seers weren't sought out maybe in their local community. It was understood that they had some sort of a gift or ability and wisdom, and so people would go to them. But the oracles were sought out across the land, the continents. I don't want to necessarily say prophet, but I feel like in some ways that's similar concept that people might maybe equate in just, oh, wow, they're like really this incredible visionary in the sense of not that they're coming up with ideas, but that there's someone who has sacred sight or divine sight. We got to talk about some Mancies. If you are not familiar with what I'm talking about, you can go back and listen. We have 2 other episodes where we talked about divination tools. Season 1, we talked about oracle cards, tarot cards, crystals, and pendulums. And then in season 2, we had another episode, and we had talked about hydromancy, tasseomancy. I forget what the palmistry one was. Oh, chiromancy, bibliomancy, and that was using text. I'm going to be sharing a couple other mancies that were very specific to ancient Greek culture. The first one is hydromancy. I actually loved reading this because, as I mentioned in part 1 of this series, I am Greek, so that was kind of cool to have that little tie-in. Next one is capnomancy. Capno comes from the ancient Greek word kapnos, which means smoke. And this is divination by looking at smoke from an animal sacrifice. So I mentioned in the last episode these different festivals or ceremonies or rituals. Back in ye olden times, there were animal sacrifices. And in this situation, when they were making the sacrifice to their gods, they were burning whatever remains of that sacrifice. In this situation, they had people that were looking at the smoke, color, shape, movement. I kind of equate it actually to hydromancy in the sense of looking at the water. What's the movement? What's it doing? I'm sure they had some oral tradition to how to actually interpret. There was also divination based on the animal entrails, meaning when they were preparing the animal for sacrifice, they would look at the different organs, understanding either is this a good sacrifice or what will be the outcome of whatever they were sacrificing for, kind of like trying to manifest. So what were they trying to call in? Were they trying to please the gods, have fortune rain down upon them? They could use the animal itself for interpretation. That one I didn't see a mancy for, but I still included it anyway because it was related to the capnomancy with the animal sacrifice. Next one is kleidinomancy. Cleido comes from the Greek root kleidon, which means an omen contained within a word or sound. Overhearing something of relevance by chance. And to me, this sounded pretty much like clairaudience. Also, what a synchronicity is. 2 events that should be unrelated, but then become related and offer you a sign, a message. It's like an answer to your question or something that you've been wondering. And all of a sudden, you just suddenly overhear it. Next up, we have amniomancy. Amnion, that is a Greek root, and it's membrane around the fetus. Looking at the tissue on the head of a baby when it's born. I think this one is pretty funny because as an astrologer, obviously we'll say the natal chart from the moment that you were born is the cosmic blueprint. It will tell you information about personality, of course, but purpose, challenges, things to work through, medicine, what you can use to heal, points of growth and learning, etc. And in a way, this amniomancy, what's the pattern? What's the color of the tissue before the baby is cleaned off? And then using that for a level of interpretation about that new individual as they have come into this world. And related, we also have birthmarks. So there was no Mancy name that I saw for this one. If the baby is born with specific markings, one, as an example, was having a mark on the forehead as that person being destined to be a great ruler. So as you can see, some of these interpretations are specifically related to forecasting the power, abilities, gifts of individuals, as well as divining information about their relationship with the gods and if they're in good standing or favor or certain outcomes, or obviously informing decision making. Now that we have set the scene with what the ancient Greeks were doing, I'm going to share what my experience was. So I was inspired by the research I did in the last episode. I meditated with 2 different goddesses while holding symbols associated with them. I wanted to give everybody a heads up. I will have on social media some infographics for the activities that spawned from each of these readings. So they came through as inspired teachings. I was reading myself alongside each of these energies, had a bunch of things come through for myself, and then each of them had, you should look into this, or you should gather information about that, and then I was able to compile those. First up, had to do it. We've talked about her in every episode, gotta keep it consistent. The first meditation that I did was with Athena. I have that little owl of Athena, and I was like, well, I gotta use this one. I got it right here on my desk. What I did ahead of each reading was to draw the goddess that I was channeling. So I was kind of using that as a way to tune in. And then I felt ready, like I had tapped in. And so the first thing that popped in was the quote, "I'm always with you." And I felt like this kind of lifting sensation. So it was almost like I was being asked to like sit up and have a stronger, more elevated posture. I was just like sitting on my bed and I just kind of, oh, okay, I guess I got to change my position. But it felt like there was like this tiny sensation of a lift from the crown of my head, also the nape of my neck, and then my brow as well. So it wasn't like the classic, oh, you have a third eye activation. I just felt like a few different little sensations all in and around my head, but related to posture and strength and certainty and confidence and conviction. And so for some of the other messages that came in, talking about being wiser about what my true potential is and my calling, rather than being starry-eyed or misty-eyed or, again, just lacking clarity. So the information that came in was to focus on reclaiming my power in authority rather than actually being on more of the releasing side, which I thought was kind of interesting because in 2026, we have 2 different eclipse series that are happening at the same time: North Node Pisces, North Node Aquarius, South Node Virgo, South Node Leo. I've kind of had in my head that I need to focus more on releasing and letting go. I can't tell you how many times I pulled a forgiveness card from my Oracle deck, which just talks about letting go with ease. This has been a pretty consistent theme. So the fact that this information came in of, it doesn't have to only be about releasing. Some of it should be action oriented, but specifically in reclaiming seat of power, confidence through strategic thinking rather than planning. And for anybody who remembers, the beginning of season 2, we had an episode on planning versus manifesting. Am I over planning, over structuring, over analyzing? This was being reaffirmed, but again, with very different language. And rather than thinking about what is it that I'm going to do next, or what would be the wisest next step, it doesn't have to come from this perspective of I'm planning and I'm making a schedule. It could be about strategy. And of course, Athena is associated with strategic thinking. This was a really helpful reframe for me. And now it's just going to be about the implementation and how can I readjust my approach a little bit. What I really loved about doing this meditation is the ideas or recommendations that came in. I was like, wow, I never even gave myself the brain power to even sit and think about any of this stuff. And also they were kind of like out of the box and I could see how that would work. So one of them as an example was I have the podcast. I have a borderline full-time job, 30 hours a week, my business, which involves me teaching classes every week, recording and editing video, actually providing psychic and astrology readings, doing events. If I want to put any products out, then I'm developing something in the background, or I'm doing social media content, writing blog posts. Like it kind of goes on and on. There's a lot of moving parts and plates that are being spun. And so something that I have been running up against is I have too many calendars. And this goes back to the strategic thinking rather than planning. I'm already updating everything in my personal calendar, which pulls in the work stuff. I have to manually add my business things because I haven't been able to get that to communicate. Each month, what are my Insight Timer classes? Put them in my regular calendar, put them in the Insight Timer calendar, put them in my Wix calendar to block the time off. That whole process takes a while. And so I just do that in one sitting once a month. But then as a month is going on and this happens and that happens, it ends up being so much administrative work just to update my calendar. And by my calendar, I mean, it's 2 calendars because it's my personal one and then it's the work one to try to make sure that everything is being captured. To keep it more simple, I'm just going to block the whole day off. I'm going to block a half day off. So rather than putting every single little event into that work calendar, I could either proactively and intentionally just say, all right, I'm going to have a busy couple weeks. Let me just entirely block off these few days that will allow me to get done these different things that I want to do. That would make things a lot easier and save me a lot of time. It also came up to stop trying to pressure myself or to feel bad if I haven't done some of those things. Whenever I do meditations with guides, or in this case, with a whole different type of spirit, if you will, and energy, it's not something that I have ever done before, saying, well, I'm going to try to sit down with an ancient Greek goddess, and what's that going to be like? I've never done that. Because of course you sit there and you go, all right, this seems ridiculous. Why am I doing this? I was inquiring, are you sure that you're not just my guides, masquerading? And it did feel very different. What I really appreciated about this experience is that I was able to remain fully present. It actually felt very compatible just with my natural energy. So I sat there and I was meditating, but I had my eyes open. My pen was flying across that tablet, and it felt very aligned and in sync with how I am, which was kind of cool. The information was so clear. It was very targeted. It was very specific. It was all actionable. And a lot of it was, hey, go sit down with your guides, work with them on these things. That's really speaking the language of what my normal guides do for me, because increasingly it's like they're giving me activities. Try this routine out, try this journal prompt out. Honestly, most of the time I'm just walking around in regular old human experience, and I'm not classical woo. I'm very grounded in some ways, but also flurry of energy and mental activity. And I do need to be checked. I do need to take moments to pause, to stop, to take stock, reassess what my priorities are, reassess how circumstances have changed. The inspired teaching was actually to advise the listener, that's you, to meditate with your chart ruler. There's 2 different ways to do it. First one is looking at the planetary ruler of your rising sign. That's easy. Everyone can do that. And then the second way is a whole calculation where you look at the distribution of planets in your charts by modality and element. If you want help with that, feel free to reach out. I do that and more in my astrology readings. Plus, at the end of March, I released my first ever course, the Astrology Foundations course, and I walk through step by step exactly how to do this in the second module. If you're interested in taking my course, I'll include the information on it in the show notes. If I look at my rising sign, which is Cancer, and I do the calculation, I get the same answer. So I just have one, the moon. And the corresponding Greek goddess is Selene. I could set the intention to sit down with her and get wisdom from her. Or if there's a particularly challenging transit, there's a Mercury retrograde, you could sit down and have your intention to meditate with Hermes. Pick whatever option that you would like, whether you want to be strictly based on your natal chart ruler or by looking at a transit, or you could have the 2 of them together and have it be a party. If you want the visual for it, I will have this mapped out and hand you a little infographic on socials. If you have the sun as your chart ruler, then you would be meditating with Apollo. For the moon, it's Selene. For Mercury, Hermes. For Venus, Aphrodite. For Mars, Aries. For Jupiter, Zeus. For Saturn, Kronos. For context, you're like, who's Kronos? I don't know this dude. I actually did talk about him in the Greek lore episode. Kronos is Zeus's dad, so he's the one that ate all of his children, and Zeus had to defeat him later. And that is partly why the planet Saturn is associated with the father. For the next 3 planets, they are all outer planets. They are modern planets. There are still associations with them in ancient Greek lore, even though they could not see these planets, even though they didn't know they existed. These names were chosen for them because of lore that did exist at that time in the culture and the discourse. If you have your rising sign as Aquarius, that's Saturn and Uranus together. So this would be a situation where you could have 2 different rulers. For Pisces, it's Jupiter and Neptune. And for Scorpio, it's Mars and Pluto. Keep that in mind as you are going through. If Uranus is your chart ruler, then you could meditate with Uranus or Uranos, who is the god of the sky. For Neptune, it would be Poseidon. And for Pluto, it would be Hades. This is a pretty male-heavy list with these gods. I'm realizing that now. Pretty much all male. There's only 2 women on here. With Athena, she isn't associated with one of the planets, but there's so many more gods and goddesses that are specific to certain areas of life. So you could also say, well, I'm interested in fertility. You pick a goddess that's associated with that. I talked about her last episode. So you can go by topic, but this specific suggested practice was thinking about the chart ruler or planetary movement. So folding in a bit of the astrology. For my second meditation, the experience of it was very different. The goddess of love, Aphrodite. I have a peach moonstone in the shape of a heart. Could it be any more on the nose? I don't think it could. And then I have rose quartz. It was actually one of the first crystals that I got when I first started building out my collection. I was drawn to have the peach moonstone in my left hand and the rose quartz in my right hand. More on that later. I did some drawing, did a little Aphrodite rendering. Once I felt like I had connected and tapped in, what came through was to close my eyes for this and to not take notes during, opposite of what I had done for the Athena reading. Anything that I was going to write down was going to be what stuck the most. What made it to my little tablet after I came out of it once I knew it was wrapped up? What did I retain? Not look at any dating apps for the next 2 months except for 2 dates. Otherwise, just have it sit. Don't even put it on pause. If I get likes and I get messages, whatever, completely table it. Sometimes you sit there and you're like, I'm getting annoyed. I'm frustrated. This isn't working. I'm not finding people to connect with or that have substantive profiles or political climate, all this other stuff. I've been walking around feeling bad that I'm like, oh, I'm busy. And I just forget to go look. And then I'll go on for a little bit and flip through it. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not like even finding any profiles to like, or I'm not talking with anyone. And so it kind of leaves you feeling some type of way. So I actually think this is really helpful. And I have found since doing this that I've then had the impulse to go check. And I have to check myself and be like, I'm not supposed to be doing it now. I have to wait. I have to wait basically a month before I can look at it again. And next, what came through was a whole self-care, self-love routine. The options that she gave were foot baths, which I have a little portable foot bath that I got years ago, and I am so overdue in using it. As well as thinking about my magnesium intake. I do have the Epsom salt, so you do get magnesium from that, but I also have powder that I'll put in water sometimes, and I am low on that, so I do have to buy a new one. Magnesium is associated with relaxing. You can use it to help you with winding down. Also helps with a lot of different regulation. And it's something that often we are under supported in. Other ways to show self-love were having healthy meals, and no one is surprised to hear this one, sleep. I have my short list of 4 things that I could be doing. They're all practices that I have done before. They're all practices that I go in and out of. The reframing here was each time I participate, it's an opportunity to show and demonstrate love for myself, not just taking care of myself. It's a way of saying I love you to me, to my body, to my being. Got a date to do another meditation with her on August 10th. So I'll see where I'm at that point in time with the podcast. Maybe I'll record a little bit of an update, TBD. This does feel like this is a checkpoint. Have you been doing your practices? I don't know what's going to come up. I don't know how much you'll hold me to account. Similar to the one with Athena, but this was so much more simple. This meditation was more about specific wellness practices and how I'm taking care of myself, and they can start today. And speaking of, what came in right at the end was a mantra. I have had a mantra that I've placed around my room, and I put it on little washi tape, and it's been peeling. And so then every day I'm pretty much going over, smoothing it out. And I've been feeling like I'm going to have to replace this soon. I think I need a new mantra, but I don't know what it is. So then, of course, I sit down in this meditation and I get one. And I was like, sweet. So I do have that cast out, I think maybe a couple days from now, to actually go around the room, completely shift the energy, and start fresh and clean with the new one. General thoughts on this experience. I was writing down the descriptors for it. The energy felt the word that I had was cheeky, and I wrote cheeky down, and then it popped in, no, flirty. So I was being edited. Like, no, I'm flirty, not cheeky, but I mean, aren't they one and the same sometimes? I guess they're not. Versus my guides, versus the Athena meditation that I had just done. They all felt different from each other, but this felt very holistic. It felt hopeful. It felt optimistic. There was a very maternal auntie type energy where I didn't get that for the Athena one. It was just like, here's what to do. Think about this. Think about that. Here's like 10 instructions. I bet you didn't think of that. No, I hadn't. I hadn't thought of any of those things. Thank you for telling me. And this was warmer, open, very compassionate. More of this feeling of just because a door closes doesn't mean that another one doesn't open. The emphasis of quiet time versus productivity, and very much the sentiment of existing versus doing. The inspired teaching. Look into the significance of the crystals that I chose and which hand they were in. The left hand symbolizes receiving, and it was in that hand that I was holding the moonstone, which symbolizes the divine feminine, perfect for Venus, love and emotions. The right side represents giving, and that's where I was holding the rose quartz, which is connected to the heart chakra, associated with offering calm and rest, as well as supporting you in releasing anger, fear, and resentment. I'm sitting down, I'm intuitively guided, put this crystal in this hand, put this crystal in that hand. I have no idea what it means. And so I don't realize until after I get fully out of the meditation and I do the research, how the table was being set and what was going to be called in. So what I was asking to receive, in essence, was support from the divine feminine. We've talked about that in our episode with Vanessa late in season 2 about the divine feminine versus masculine. And I definitely trend a little bit more on the masculine side. And I have been working hard is the wrong phrasing. But I have, with intention, attempted to instill more practices and more support and frameworks around being in a more divine feminine state. So in essence, I was sitting down and trying to call more of that in, as well as love, support for emotions and regulation and nourishment. All of that stuff is really great and super supportive for me. And with the right hand, that's giving. Rose quartz is associated with releasing. We were talking about releasing earlier. Even though Athena was like, hey, don't focus on releasing all the time for the Aphrodite reading, I was like, what is it you're looking to release? Those negatively charged emotions, the things that are holding you back, getting rid of those, giving your heart making sure that what I am pushing out into the world is a calm energy, is a restful energy. I might also sit there and go, wow, I would love to have more of a rest and calm and receiving in my left hand. And I didn't have that in this reading. But now that I know what this means, I could, going forward, leverage that rose quartz more, have it on my left side or have it in my left hand if it's something that I am looking to rebalance. Some quick housekeeping to wrap up this Greek lore mini-series. Please share your thoughts, questions, and feedback to the best of my ability and with timing, because I'm obviously recording ahead. I can make adjustments, and I can also circle back in some of the bonus episodes. So if there's questions, we don't have to 100% close the chapter on Greek lore. However, the main book is closing with this episode. Speaking of books, the next episode of Synergy to Synastry that's going to pop up in your feed will be our second installment of the Soul Rising Book Club. I will be discussing chapters 5 through 7, so make sure to read those and collect your thoughts so we can chat. And before we hop into our time machine and travel to our next culture, which I'm not revealing now, nice try, I'm also going to be releasing a special psychic reading episode. So Christina and I mentioned this at the beginning of the season. Between each of the mini-series, we will have a psychic reading episode. But do not forget, at the end of 2025, we recorded an entire 2026 year-ahead forecast. We talked about the numerology, we talked about eclipses from the astrological perspective, and then each of us did a year-ahead forecast. So make sure to go back and listen to that. These little readings between each mini-series will be to supplement because things are going to change. We have new info. We have amendments. I have not listened back to that 2026 reading since I recorded it. It's been many months now. And I am going to be recording that psychic forecast episode actually today. Once I record it, I am definitely going to go back and listen because I'm curious to see how they intersect or relate with each other. Because there's got to be a through line, right? There's got to be something that comes up. But maybe not, because so much has changed this year. I don't know where we're all going to be at a month or two's time. But as of right now, 2026 has really been very, very intense. So I appreciate you being here, listening, following along. Make sure to share, comment, reach out. And yeah, I will see you in book club.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more, the resources we used to prepare for this episode are listed in the show notes.
If you're curious to develop your intuition, we've partnered with the Nuurvana Be Light program to give our listeners a $500 discount on tuition fees. Email us for more details and we'll connect you with the founder, Deganit Noor.
Want to connect with us? You can reach me, Christine, at Channeled by Christine with 1 L on Instagram.
And you can reach me, Renee, at _read by Renee. Or connect with us both via email at synergytosynastry@gmail.com.
Keep your spirit curious and your aura sparkling.
We'll see you when the stars next align. Ay, ay, ay. And I'm pulling that up right now. Where am I? Oh, okay. Greek lore. All right.